Okay. Thanks so much for giving me the opportunity to be here. It's the first time in Cyprus. I'm so excited to be here, and thanks to the audience. My name is Enrique Orduña, and I'm associate professor at the Politècnica University of Valencia, and my strange department is History of Art, Audiovisual Communication, and Documentation, so I understand that's somewhat strange. And from a few years ago, I'm the head of Altmetric Labs, a research group devoted to the analysis of scholarly web-based data. In this case, my presentation will be devoted to analysis to analyze a specific research assessment instrument that is conducted in Spain, oriented to academics. This in Spanish, we use a very specific name that probably in English is somewhat sexy. That is sexennials in Spanish. This is a 6-year period of analysis for one scholar. And that research instrument existed for long before, but last year it changed. And in this process of changing, altmetrics indicators and a lot of different dimensions to assess scholars were merged in this new instrument, and my purpose today is to show these changes. This instrument, we can say that we have different steps. We have on the first, on the one side, a general criteria. To develop the general criteria, the National Research Assessment Body in Spain, NANECA, call a body of external experts, and I was included in that pool of experts, and a specific criteria for each of the disciplines in which any bibliometrician was involved, okay? Only people from each of fields of knowledge in each of the committees. So bibliometricians and experts in research assessment only participated in the general criteria of the instrument. So this change included a use of new metrics, new indicators, and include the use of narratives in order to defend the contribution for each of the applicants each year to this assessment exercise. So I will describe these metrics, the changes, and the narratives that include all the metrics. And at the end, I will talk briefly about some frictions that we experienced among different actors that participated directly or in an indirect way in the redesigning of this research instrument. So just like a theater, I will try to divide my presentation in these 3 acts. First, I will talk briefly about the basics of research evaluation and the reform that obviously comes from other reforms in the whole world, but I will focus specifically on Spain. Then the second act will be devoted to analyze this new exercise, the dimensions, metrics, and the narrative bibliometrics, and the structure of the narrative bibliometrics that we are using since the last year. And I will finalize my presentation with some lessons learned in this process that is still going on, it's not finished. In last June, we had the first results of research assessment, and we expect to slightly change the policies for the next exercise at the end of the year. Okay, so let's start with the first point. Yesterday, a colleague was talking about the basics of or reasons of research evaluation. Here I have a slightly different proposal. Research assessment can be conducted for a lot of different reasons. Obviously, in some cases, just we want to certify a research result for different reasons. Sometimes it's just a teaching process between the professor and the disciples. Sometimes it's just to control the quality of the research result for validity, robustness, and any other element in the process of publication in the publishing industry, in the academic public industry. Sometimes just we want to know what happened with the publications already published. This is just a second step in the assessment to know what happened with the results and with the publications, both inside the research community and outside the research community that makes different interpretations. Sometimes we want to know how the research results were discussed between scholars, between their community, and sometimes we want to know how the research results were perceived by the society in general, governments, private companies, organizations, and citizens, for example. In other cases, just we want to assess because of we are demanding money, we are demanding funding to carry out our research, and in these cases, in most cases, the research assessment is checking points. This is sometimes frustrating. For example, in my region, in Valencia, in Spain, when we ask for money in research projects, our proposal has 0 points in the result. All 100% in the evaluation is the curriculum of the members of the team. Okay, so probably we can use ChatGPT in this case to assess the research projects, or even the squirrels that Mike was talking about. And finally, to promote scholars, to promote academics. So the purpose is to select a person or to promote a person. And I find this kind of assessment as like a second generation because we are sometimes assessing things and issues that were already assessed in the past. Obviously, this promotion is based on the assessment of publications already assessed in the past or based on projects already assessed in the past. But this influence of research results should be calculated in that moment ad hoc for the research assessment instrument. And here we have one of the first problems we face. Who is the responsible of collecting and analyzing the data to be used in the research instrument? Now, in Spain, is the people being reviewed. Okay, the applicants should collect, should analyze, and understand sometimes the results in order to create a defense, a text, a narrative to defend the contributions in the national research ANECA, okay, the body of national research assessment. That's a problem, and in the new research exercise, is still the applicant should collect the data, and I feel that is obviously dangerous because applicants don't know anything about bibliometric indicators, but they need to know the best metrics to know how to interpret and to write a narrative in order to defend their contributions. That's so problematic. Okay, when redesigning the instrument, we had to follow specific steps. So obviously, specifically from a quantitative point of view, we had to ask the very first question, what's the purpose behind the assessment? And the purpose by law in Spain is to prove research activity in 6 years. It's not talking about research excellence. It's just to prove a research activity over 6 years. That makes a difference. So once we know that we need to assess activity, we need to identify specific dimensions related to activity, then specific indicators related to each of the dimensions, metrics related to each of the indicators, and so on. Obviously selecting the sources, and this 5-point establishing weights to create a score because the instrument is based on a score to make a decision. And I will explain later. Obviously, all these weights are subjective. It's inherently subjective to establish weights, but we need to understand that these weights should be aligned with the proposal, with the what the government wants to evaluate, obviously. Every weight is subjective in its nature. And establishing maximum or minimum thresholds if required, depending on the metric and the evidence provided by applicants. Okay, so when redesigning the instrument in the expert panel, we were people from the quantitative school of thought and qualitative school of thought. That was enriching to some extent, but in other points problematic because we have different points of view when assessing research. Our purpose is just to enrich the instrument and to find a balance. But sometimes a balance is hard to find because perspectives, ideas, backgrounds, interests are absolutely different. But we try our best to do that. Obviously, I will explain this briefly because obviously this has been commented on these days. Each approach has its own advantages and disadvantages. And in research evaluation, in fact, my position is in the middle, the best of two worlds. It's probably problematic, but that's my position. We all know that qualitative evaluation of contributions has specific advantages, can be more granular. We can detect careers that are out of the mainstream standard. I mean, scholars with an activity that is out of the mainstream activity of researchers. We can apply an assessment for disciplines that are not based on citations, are not based on publication the same way as other empirical disciplines. And sometimes this type of evaluation is aimed at improving and can serve the people evaluated to improve. Obviously, and we have several disadvantages. It's slower, it's expensive. Obviously, an inherent subjectivity by the evaluators, the reviewers, and in our case, the most problematic thing is to find real experts. Because what we are finding is that everyone is reviewing without knowing nothing about bibliometric indicators. They can know about their discipline. I can know a lot of mathematics, but that makes me a perfect evaluator for research in mathematics. So that's a problem. And the reviewers are not bibliometricians, are experts in their fields. So that's a problem. And obviously, in this humoristic comic strip, we can highlight these problems that we face sometimes with qualitative points of view when we are reviewing. Okay, who is reviewing my publication? That's a problem not only in research assessment, but obviously journal articles. We are experiencing a crisis in peer review, but for example, in research projects, the regional agency in Valencia, for example, is outsourcing this process of assessment, and people that doesn't know even how to search a journal in journal citation reports is giving reports to the applicants. And I suffered that thing myself, for example, telling that, okay, this publication is not indexed in journal citation reports. Okay, sorry, but it's indexed. You don't know how to search in the journal citation report, and you are reviewing me. So that's so problematic. In the case of quantitative evaluation, we also have specific advantages. It's faster, allows comparison. 10 citations is the same here in China, in Spain, in any place. We may say that it's objective, the number is objective, but the interpretation of the number is not objective. Probably 10 citations is not the same, or it's not the same meaning for you, for example. Each individual may think in different ways when the number 10 comes into play. But in this case, also introduces a specific disadvantages. Probably the lack of open suppliers is going to be overcome in the future. Don't know if OpenAlex or similar databases will fill the gap. It's still not. This database is not yet a correct database to be used alone. It's also expensive because sometimes we need to pay for metrics elaborated by databases under paid subscription. So it's not for free using a specific metric sometimes. And this approach doesn't work in specific disciplines not based on citations. For example, in some social sciences, humanities, fine arts, and others, some engineering, for example. And obviously, all citation-based indicators are based on a social construct related to the positive view about citations. A citation is by default good, so if you have a lot of citations, that is inherently good. And that's not always correct, because citations can be received for a number of different reasons. And my problem is not negative citations, but superfluous and gratuitous citations that are increasing with literature reviews recently, for example. So my position is just to combine the best of two worlds. That's, again, a humoristic chemistry, in this case, for the limitations of the quantitative evaluation. So sometimes the citations come from diverse reasons, not necessarily related to the quality of the paper. So obviously, just counting number of citations doesn't resolve anything. So the reform change things in Spain also. This is like the killer slide. Everyone has a similar slide these days. I have no more space in the slide for more declarations, so please no more declarations. I'm joking. But my belief is that declarations, manifests are positive, but necessarily not change things, because it's the government who is changing things. That's my lesson learned in Spain. We have a lot of declarations. Only when the government decided to change and signed a change by law, things change. And the problem is that never in the history, in the recent history in Spain, never bibliometricians and experts in research assessment have been included in the bodies, in the committees deciding these things. Okay, so the problem is not quantitative approach. The problem is not bibliometrics. The problem is not H-index. The problem is that the people deciding the instruments to assess research doesn't know nothing about that. That's a real problem. So, summarizing these changes, I divided the reform in two blocks: technical issues and political issues. And I will explain briefly each of them, but to some extent describes the change we have experienced in Spain last year. Okay, so first, avoiding simple metrics, including normalized indicators. For example, some of this in this slide. In any case, applicants are not required to employ specific metrics in the exercise. Okay, they can include any metric they believe are important to defend their contributions. Some of these metrics are also problematic because applicants should collect the data, and not everyone can collect, for example, the CNCI from Insights because it's under subscription. So if I'm requesting a user to collect the data and the user cannot access to the data, is absurd. But obviously, a movement towards normalized indicators. Second point, probably more problematic, the use of alternative metrics. And that's not necessarily related to quality. This is not the point. The point is that applicants should demonstrate that the article has a specific recipient by the community or by the society, not necessarily related to research impact. So applicants can collect data from social media metrics, can collect data from specific platforms, for example, the publisher website, the university website, repositories, for example, and collect web-based metrics, for example, the number of downloads or any other similar metric, to prove that the article experienced some kind of engagement with the audience or any kind of interactivity or use by the community. That sometimes is necessary because in specific fields, the number of citations is really low. For example, I can write a paper in library science and receive 0 citations. That's normal. but probably all librarians in my country are using the results of my paper to change things in the library, but they don't publish papers. I not receive citations, but my contribution is being used in a particular professional thesis in the library. And mentions and citations from specific or special artifacts, sometimes reviewed publications and sometimes non-reviewed publications. Citations or mentions from patents, from policy reports, clinical guidelines, and so on, and mentions appeared in the news, sometimes general news or specialized academic specialized news, or even press releases. So all these metrics can be used by applicants to defend their contribution in the assessment exercise. Next, expanding the databases that the users can employ. Since the last year, only Scopus and Web of Science were the only bibliographic databases that applicants have to use. And now applicants can use any database defined, and they decide that provide a metric that can be used. Obviously, that introduces different problems. These databases may have limitations, errors, whatever we already know, but it's the job of the reviewer to understand and to filter the data provided by the applicant and understand whether the contribution has the minimum threshold to be to receive a positive response or not. Sometimes, for example, regional databases are of interest. Let's think, for example, that I'm in Argentina and I'm analyzing Argentinian horses. It's so hard to believe that I will receive citations from France. But it doesn't mean that the article or the contribution is not of interest for the region in which these horses are placed, okay? So sometimes these regional databases with publications written in languages beyond English is of importance for specific fields and specific applicants. Okay. Then expanding the indicators to be used in the application, not only citation-based indicators, but metrics that can evidence the activity of the scholar, the academic, or the contribution being evaluated. For example, analyzing the social influence that just showed in a few slides before, the regional influence of the publication, gender perspective. It's not the gender of the authors, but the use of a gender perspective in the methodology of a research. That's different point. So, for example, in my field, in searching on the web, a gender perspective is absolutely essential. So, if you use a gender perspective methodology in your paper, this is something that you can include in your proposal to be evaluated. And finally, to be transparent, and that's my vision of open science, in the center, the open infrastructures, and obviously in this the open evaluation and the open results are essential to avoid closed platforms in order to evaluate people. This is a slow process, but we are going towards this scenario. So obviously, theoretical assumptions are so easy. We all know what is more or less a best approach to evaluate contributions, but the reality is that we have specific constraints. Applicants want the results as soon as possible. Sometimes that's not possible. We need money, obviously, to change how research is being assessed in any place. We need technical infrastructures. In Spain, we lack that kind of infrastructure to allow the process of assessment. And obviously, new metrics, new indicators, we need to test a lot of things. But for me, training is the most important thing. We need to train applicants, but also we need to train the reviewers. So I was in a training process with the reviewers, only 2 hours, a course of 2 hours to teach the reviewers how to evaluate. That's not possible. These people is evaluating other scholars, and only 2 hours is not possible to proceed with an assessment a national assessment with specific consequences. So I will go forward to advance in my presentation. That's the instrument is 6 years of productivity. The result is a productivity bonus. It's 120 euros per month since the year in which you receive the positive response until the day you retire. Okay, so you can obtain up to 6 positive responses. So that is something like 700 euros per month since the day you receive the positive response until the day you retire from the university. But the problem is that is being changed. It's only research productivity bonus, but has been changed as a symbol of prestige within the Spanish universities. So when you have 2 positive responses, you can be in a board, you can apply for a project, you can do a lot of different things. If you have not that research activity, you cannot do a lot of things inside the university. So that's a change in the game. Scholars have to provide 5 contributions in 6 years, and each of the contributions is scored from 0 to 10. Okay, and you need to receive 30 points to receive the positive response by the government. So I will go forward. And I will put my time in the most important things. One of the elements that change things is the deposit. Scholars are required to deposit all the contributions provided to the evaluation in any thematic or institutional repository, not full text, at least the metadata, and each contribution should obtain a persistence identifier. And the digital object identifier, handle, or whatever. That's a complementary thing. Each contribution without these elements will not be evaluated in Spain. Okay. The result, at the end of the year, we experience the highest increase in self-archiving in Spain. Never ever in the history of at least in Spain, academics uploaded documents to the institutional repository. The self-archiving is so low in Spain. Open access advocacies, open science never work. Now, government changed the law, all scholars are uploading papers. That's first lesson learned here. Second, scholars can include any database, metrics from any database, and can use any metric and any indicator they believe can defend the contribution. So I will advance. That's how the general criteria ended. These percentages were not decided by the external experts, but by the government. Okay, so we see that 6 points out of the 10 points is just the scientific impact of each of the contributions. And the experts in each of the fields decided inside each of these boxes, okay, how we have to evaluate. So I see if I have just a few minutes, I will explain this and I will finalize with the conclusions. So all these metrics, indicators that applicants can use should be incorporated in a narrative. That's highly controversial. Some people hate this narrative, some people love that narrative. The point is that it's like a process. The author selects the contribution, identifies signals of quality or impact, and group each signal in the different dimensions and metrics. And I will show very briefly the dimensions that now the Spanish assessment body is using to evaluate people. We have 3 types of dimensions. That's the dimensions at the contribution level. So one dimension is citation-based metrics, but also applicants can use usage, social influence, and social visibility metrics, okay? At the contribution level, this is the dimensions at the channel level, the source level. So applicants can use impact or quality indicators to be used in the evaluation. So you can still use the journal impact factor, but the effects of the journal impact factor are minimal in the final evaluation. So the purpose is not to delete that kind of indicators, but reduce the impact or the effect of the application of the indicators in the final decision. And the final dimension is at the open level. So we have the deposit, the preprints, for example, sharing the code, sharing the raw data of the paper in specific repositories, and citizen science. You have the participation of citizens you can include in your application. And just I will finalize with this. That's an example in which we are transforming the way applicants evidence their contribution. My contribution has been published in a Q1 journal. That was the evaluation 2 years ago. It was enough to a positive response. Now it's required a narrative. You need to explain the impact of a contribution with its advantages and disadvantages, obviously, because not everyone is able to write that kind of narrative because they are not understanding the metrics. That's the problem I hope we can overcome in the future. So that's different examples. That's a narrative example with different agents that you can identify in a narrative structure with different elements inside. I have no time, but I will share the presentation. You can find it easily. And I will finalize with the results of the assessment. So almost 14,000 applicants and almost 95 and 97% of positive responses, depending on non-tenure or tenure academics in Spain. Some people love these results and some people hate these results, okay? Depending on the purpose and the school of thought. Sometimes this quasi almost 100% is perceived in a negative way by some scholars. And that's some frictions between actors. I have no time now, sorry. I finalize with some lessons learned. We need to separate research activity from research impact or research excellence. This exercise is to measure research activity, only research activity. And the work between evaluators and experts should be in a different way. Now, that is something that is not operating well, need to be improved. And from the government, we need infrastructure and we need explanatory material for reviewers and for applicants, okay? So my apologies for expanding the time of my presentation, and thanks so much for your attention.
Thank you. Question? Can you expand a bit on what the researchers thought about the narrative part of the metrics?
The narrative part? Okay, that's an example, okay, of a structured narrative with different elements that you can include that are summarized here in this slide. It's elements that you can include in your narrative. The purpose is that you need to explain why your publication is of relevance beyond the number of citations or beyond the journal in which you published your results, so that reviewers may understand why a positive response is required. That's only an example of how you can filter the data, identify specific agents that are cited in your papers. For example, you may say, sorry, I will go here, for example. You may say your paper was downloaded 350 times. That's just a number, but you can filter and add context to that number. So it's a mix between qualitative and quantitative because the data is collected but explained. The problem is that you need time to do that. And we know that applicants are using ChatGPT to create this kind of narratives. My concern is that reviewers also use ChatGPT to understand the narratives.
More question? Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you.